Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 74. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are covering chapter 14 of Goblet of Fire, The Unforgivable Curses.
Or, as we like to call it, compliments and torture.
Yeah, so we're jumping into a pretty big chapter. The leave off from last chapter was us just waiting for Mad-Eye Moody's first DADA lesson.
Finally, after all this time.
I guess Snape is in a bad mood and he gives Neville the worst attention ever.
Yeah, he makes him disembowel toads, which disemboweling anything is generally not fun. But toads is specifically sad for Neville as a person who, has a toad. It's a little morbid.
Yeah, it feels intentionally cruel because in Prisoner of Azkaban, he tried to poison Neville's toad. So it just feels like he's picking on Neville because it's easy pickings for Snape because he's mad about something. So I'm giving him his first sucks point for Goblet of Fire.
Yeah, that's fair. He deserves that one. I won't fight you on that particular one.
Harry thinks that Snape is wary of Moody. He's not acting like he usually would. We know that he wants the DADA job, but with Lupin, he was very, outwardly rude to him, but he's, avoiding Moody.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a number of different reasons why maybe Snape is a little more conscientious of Moody. Possibly it could be because he thinks Moody could suss him out due to his Death Eater past. Know there's some sort of nefarious stuff going on with Snape because Moody is a notorious catcher of dark wizards and Snape does dabble in those particular arts. Another one could just be that he's seen Moody before and knows something's up because it's not Moody.
Yeah.
So maybe he's just a little suspicious of Moody. This seems like a little bit out of character behavior. I'm on to you. And another one could just be petty annoyingness. I don't want to look at you because you have the job I want and how dare you?
I do think there's some awkwardness there because I'm assuming at this point Snape doesn't suspect him of being a Death Eater. He thinks he actually is Mad-Eye Moody. And I could see Mad-Eye Moody not liking Snape because Mad-Eye Moody doesn't trust Snape.
Yeah.
Dumbledore's the only one that trusts Snape. Mad-Eye Moody knows he's a Death Eater, and I think Snape is also aware of that, and so it's awkward because he's probably the one person at the school that's really aware of his past.
Yeah, he's got a nose for trouble, and Snape is trouble, and has a nose, so. So they're all standing around in front of the classroom waiting for Moody to arrive.
They're lining up to get into this class. They're excited.
Yeah, and they know he's coming because they can hear him because obviously he has one leg and one peg. And I think having a distinctive gait where you can tell that a very particular person is coming just by the sound of their walking, it feels so powerful. It kind of reminds me of in school when you would have a supply teacher, a female supply teacher, you would know you were about to have a supply teacher because you would hear the high heels walking down the floor. So someone's unexpected or someone different is coming and you sort of hold your breath in suspense ooh, which supply teacher are we getting? Are we going to be watching a Bill Nye or are we going to be having a surprise pop quiz?
Mm-hmm.
Wait till we find out. And so I feel that's so powerful. You hold your breath and you're sitting in suspense kind of when there's that sort of specific gait, and that's just so powerful. It gives Moody such a vibe.
Well, we do find out that Moody only plans to stay for the 1 year as a favor to Dumbledore, which is interesting because I feel every other prof they've been trying to fill this job for so many years and everyone only stays 1 year, and it's usually because they die or something happens to them. So it's nice that he's only committed for the 1 year because it's he knows.
Maybe Barty Crouch was they only have a 1 year opportunity to be here. I should clarify that I'm gone next year so no one feels the need to do anything to me.
He has plans for the next year. He's this is only a temp job until my, master comes back, and then that's going to be my full-time job.
Exactly. I'm just going to be an entry-level employee for the Dark Lord next year, so I got to wrap up this supply teaching gig. So Ron is one of the first people to answer Moody's question about the Unforgivable Curses. And first of all, it makes Moody smile to see Ron, and he compliments Ron's dad. And I know that Crouch is secretly an evil person and a prison escapee, but he's doing really good things for Ron's self-esteem. Both acknowledging him, the look on his face implies he thinks Ron's smart and clever, and then complimenting his father, and we know how Ron feels about his family and is constantly being badgered, and his family's always being made fun of. So it's such a good thing for Ron to be told yes, correct, good job, but also, oh, your dad's great. That's so what Ron needs to hear.
Yeah. Especially after last chapter.
Yeah, it's just the compliments is good.
Yeah.
Good job. sinister, evil, dark wizard fronting as a supply teacher.
Yeah, it's sad because like I talk a lot about it's hard because like when you read a lot of this, you think it's Moody and everything seems great, and now just reading it back, I'm just like, but this isn't Moody. This is an imposter, and everything's terrible.
But at the same time, not bad for Ron.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is like the first time we really learn about curses, and it's alongside the students. But Moody does say that dark curses are usually taught in the 6th year, but Dumbledore is the one that wants them taught to the 4th years. And I'm like, this probably fits with Dumbledore's kind of, motivations for Harry, as you always talk about how every year Dumbledore has things he wants Harry to learn or experience. So it is interesting that like there's this Voldemort plot, and Dumbledore's like, this is the year I want these 4th years to learn these spells specifically.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Moody does say that Dumbledore thinks the students can handle it, because the reason it obviously is probably taught to older years is because, you're 16, 17, you're a bit more emotionally prepared.
Yeah, then 14.
And it's also weird that like both Neville and Harry are in this class, and they have trauma relating to these specific curses.
Yeah.
And there's probably other students that we don't know about that might also have trauma regarding these curses. And even just it's just one thing to like see in the classroom. And like I'm just thinking about safeguarding in general. Like Dumbledore obviously knows about Neville and Harry, and he's just like, oh yeah, just demonstrate them in front of the students. That's fine.
Yeah. A better headmaster than Dumbledore would know that maybe the kids need to see it, but know that some of the students are more sensitive to that, and have them have a meeting with their head of house later that day where they can talk about what they saw and how it made them feel, like therapy, because there's no actual therapist at Hogwarts. If they were, they could meet with them. But I don't think Dumbledore necessarily cares about how, like, he wants to see how it will impact Harry, seeing what happened to his parents happen in front of him again to someone, or something. Like, he's not just teaching them about curses to prepare them. He's also testing Harry's ability to, like, overcome emotional trauma again. He's reopening the old wounds in Harry to see how, like, resilient he can be.
It's just like the option of just like not knowing that I hate. It's just like I never took biology, but I know that like for the dissections, it was like you know when it was going to take place, and you had the option to actually do it, or you could do something else if you weren't comfortable with that. And it's like that they go into this class not knowing what the hell is going on, and he's like, oh, we're learning about these traumatizing curses today, and also I'm going to demonstrate them in front of you.
Yeah, it's a lot. I will say that, like, I feel bad for Neville because, I feel bad for Harry because Dumbledore's sort of doing this to manipulate him. But Neville sort of often ends up being the uncomfortable, like the innocent bystander who gets hurt in it, because, like, he's hurting Harry to see how Harry handles it, but he's also hurting Neville in the same way and doesn't really care about the repercussions it has on Neville at all. And it's just like, it's always Neville.
Neville just, like, he's always, like, stuck in between Dumbledore's plans for Harry, and it's not fair.
Yeah. And when they're talking about how the ministry sort of determines what grade they normally learn these curses and stuff, it's interesting because I know in the next book, everyone is shocked when Umbridge is appointed, and like they're like, oh no, the ministry is interfering at Hogwarts. But like the ministry always a little bit interferes at Hogwarts, right? Like they do set the norms on like what grades certain things should be taught. Like they sort of work like a school board and a government body at the same time. So I kind of think that they always meddle.
I feel like there's a set curriculum, but like Dumbledore, he tweaks things and does things his way, and they kind of talk about that later. Being Dumbledore will just like do whatever he wants, but I feel like there is like a set thing, like because they have exams and stuff. There's things they have to like know before like their practical exams.
I sort of think of the way the ministry is interfering, sort of like the way, at least I know in the United States, the government often interferes with schools by saying, like, you can't teach them about this essential historical event because it's sad and they're kids. But meanwhile, like, it's a really important thing to know about, and like, it happened, and pretending it didn't happen isn't going to make the world a better place. Acknowledging that it did is going to make the world a better place. And like, so I'm sure there's a lot of politics involved in what the actual curriculum is at Hogwarts. And like, to an extent, I think it definitely makes sense that he's showing them these spells because they do need to know how to defend themselves. And if you don't know, like to me, knowing what the wand movement is and the verbal incantation for a certain spell allows you the opportunity to like know how to respond to it. Once they learn the defensive spells, they'll know which spells to use. And obviously Avada Kedavra, there's no counter curse. So you know if they're doing that wand movement and they start saying that word, get the heck out of the way. But if they're doing a different curse that you'll learn about, you'll know what you can do to actually defend yourself. So I do think it's essential for them to learn that. I think maybe it is a bit early, but based on the signs people are seeing, it maybe Dumbledore's decided they're going to have to learn things early because there's war and trauma coming.
Dumbledore's trying to, like, prep Harry, but at the cost of all the other students and their psyches.
Also, another thing I love about Moody is he has a catchphrase, the constant vigilance. And I just think that's so fun to have a catchphrase. And I wonder what the Golden Trio's catchphrases would be. So, like, I think Hermione's would definitely be "I'll be in the library," because I feel like it's an appropriate response to anything that happens for her, and she says it a lot. And I feel like Harry's would be some version of "Oh, look, someone's trying to kill me," because that is how it goes. I'm not sure what Ron's would be, though.
I mean, in the movies, he says bloody hell a lot. I feel like Ron's just very, it's just like, he's just like in like the office or something and things are happening and he's like the one looking at the audience being like, what the fuck? Like, I feel like he has like a side eye or just like a face that he makes all the time when things happen. He's like, this again?
So basically, we're fucked, would be Ron's.
Because Ron just goes with everything. Like, he's like, okay, someone's trying to kill Harry again. You know what? That's my life now. So when Moody's doing his instruction, he stops to call it Lavender for showing her, I think it's like her star chart under the desk. So it shows that his eye can see through wood and also the back of his head, which is a great teaching tool.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of teachers that would have killed to have that skill.
And it's also kind of foreshadowing like all the things his magic eye can see through because we find out later it can see through invisibility cloaks when Harry gets caught. It's nice to see Ron participating in this class when he gives up the Imperious Curse, because usually in the classes it's very much like Hermione volunteering information, whatever. But Ron's very like active in this class, which is like kind of like the first time we see it.
It's because it's the fun class and he's hyped. The twins have like prepped him to be hyped. Like they want to sit at the front of that class. They want to be as involved as possible because whatever Moody's going to do is going to be memorable and interesting.
I also don't like the use of spiders in this demonstration. I get it, but I'm with Ron. Ron was so excited for this class, and then the spiders got brought out, and he's like right in front of Moody's desk, and he's like, I have made a mistake.
I mean, as a noted hater of spiders, I don't like when he makes the spider bigger so they can see the finer details of the curse. That's terrifying. But like, I guess I would rather see him torture spiders, which I think are malicious intentionally and evil, sinister creatures, than like a bunny. Like, I'm not for animal testing. I'm against animal testing. But if he wanted to display it and he was going to use something alive to get the point across and traumatize them into remembering, I would rather spiders than any other number of more friendly and snuggly creatures.
Well, Neville volunteers the Cruciatus Curse, which makes me very sad rereading this, because like he would have to have been told this information because he was too young when it happened to his parents for him to remember to know. And the fact that he's just volunteering this information, because Neville never volunteers in class, and it's like reiterated by Harry saying like he only really volunteers in herbology, which is his best subject.
Yeah. I think Neville doesn't always remember things. Like even if someone told him something once, he's not going to remember it. But because the memory of having this spell explained to him was paired with every memory he has of his parents since that point, it's really deep inside of him.
I also think his grandma probably brings it up a lot because she kind of remembers her son as like a big hero. So she's like, yeah, like this happened to my son and he was a hero and all this stuff. And I'm sure it's part of like her story whenever people talk about his dad or his mom.
And I can see Moody and or Barty Crouch, I guess. We can see Crouch realize who Neville is, like, oh, you're Longbottom, and like make the connection. And
yes. Oh my God. Can I just say it is so fucked up. It is so fucked up that this is the person that did it, that he did this to his parents, and like he's there and Neville is giving up this information. He knows who he is and he is looking at this kid who he like did this to his parents. Like, oh my God, it's so fucked up.
But he's playing it so cool because when you read it, he comes across as empathetic.
Yeah, that's how they trick you.
Even later when you first sort of start to learn about, like, you think like, oh, Moody was like, he remembered what happened and he didn't push Neville and he just moved on quickly. He didn't give him the whole, oh, I know why you know about that, like Ron's dad knowing about the Imperious Curse. He just like moves on. And you're like, how empathetic of him to see Neville's emotional and move on. And meanwhile, it's like,
he was there. He did it.
Ugh, it's grimy. It's really grimy.
Reading it just gave me like a shiver. I was like this guy is just sitting across from this kid who he traumatized, and he's just like pretending, oh, I don't know, I don't know anything about that.
It's really interesting that Neville felt comfortable answering that question because he rarely answers questions. And B, he knows once the question is answered, Moody's going to demonstrate that curse on the spider. So he knows he's sort of speeding up that moment of having to see it. And also the answer is so personal to Neville. Like it comes along with the memories and the visualizations and the history and the loss, you know? And it makes me curious, like, A, maybe Neville knows what the next curse is as well, and he knows Harry's gonna also be like feeling the same way. Because I feel like Neville's one of those kids whose grandmother maybe told him about all three unforgivable curses. You know what I mean? And in his mind, he knows enough to be like, I'm hurt by this, but the next one's Harry's, and I don't want to be less strong than Harry, you know? Like, I think there's that. And also, like, I wonder if it's like a reflex. You know, like when you don't want to think about something and someone mentions something and you think about the thing you're trying to ignore, like don't think about blue socks. You immediately think about blue socks. And as soon as he hears unforgivable curses, his brain goes, don't think about your parents. And then immediately he blurts it out because he can't help it, you know? It's interesting. Or maybe there's a part of him that wants to talk about it, right? Because like I'm sure he gets talked to about it often by his grandmother, but it's not like a back and forth. And I feel like there's probably a part of him somewhere deep down that wishes he could confide in his friends about that. And this is the first time he's been near some of his friends and it's come up. And there's a part of him that like wants to see how they react to it, you know?
Yeah, because Neville doesn't talk about his parents to anyone.
Exactly. Maybe he's testing the waters a bit to see like how supportive would they be about this.
I also wonder how much he knew too, because obviously he knows the cursed name and he knows what has happened to his parents as they're in St. Mungo's and they don't remember and they can't talk or their memories are just kind of like, oh, their brains are all scrambled. But I don't wonder. I do think seeing it and seeing what the curse does, like in person, kind of like it was too much for him. And I don't know if he was fully like aware of what happened because I could see his grandparents telling him a more like child friendly version.
They're not going to describe the intimate details of what it looks like. Yeah. They're going to say they were dignified and they held strong. They're not going to say they wet themselves, they were in so much pain, like not the realities of the situation.
And I think you can see that kind of in Neville's reaction where he kind of like tentatively gave this up because he doesn't know, but he wasn't really prepared for like the visual of it, like the practicality of it. And I think, yeah, we do see that.
Moody talks about how that spell is often used for torture, and he says you don't need thumb screws or knives to torture a wizard when you can do the spell. But I think that's a goofy thing to say because like I bet before this curse they still didn't use thumb screws and knives. Like they're still magic. You can use a perfectly harmless magic spell to hurt someone if you use it maliciously. You know what I mean? Like a spell that makes water appear, you could drown someone. Like there's so many ways to hurt people with magic. I highly doubt the sinister wizards were using thumb screws or
Yeah, I wonder if that's to connect to like the audience, like the kids, because when we think of like medieval torture and like or just torture, you think of like those mob movies where they're tied to a chair and they're like cutting off thumbs or something.
Could you imagine if they went worse than thumb screws? He's like, it's not like the old pair of anguish. Like, good. And kids have to go home and Google that and be traumatized for forever.
I also wonder if maybe Moody was like Muggle born or something, and so.
But it's not Moody. It's Barty Crouch.
That's true.
Right? It's such a trap. Even when you know, you're still like.
Yeah, it's hard because like it's hard reading this because sometimes I'm just like, oh, Moody, because we do know Moody in the next book and in the series. But it's hard to like switch.
Which is so funny. They jump from not knowing him at all because we didn't actually know him this book to like best pals. Oh yeah, our good bud Moody. And it's like, I think it's the false memories of good things that happened with Barty Crouch that they implant in their brains and use to build their friendship with real Moody on. And it's so funny because like they really just jump into being close and we love him. Oh yeah. And it's like, you don't know him at all. And they just like accept all their good memories of Barty as Moody. And it's so funny.
I feel like there should have been a time in Order of the Phoenix to establish who the real Moody is and stuff. And we get like a little bit of it, but there was so much going on in Order of the Phoenix that by like Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows are just like, oh, Moody, that guy, we love him. I'm sad he's dead. And I'm just like, what? We haven't spent like any time with him. Yeah, so I just want to thank Hermione for looking out for Neville because no one else does. Because obviously she sees that Neville, like when he's seeing the demonstration of the Cruciatus Curse, like he goes all white. He's like white knuckling the desk, like he is like probably gonna have a panic attack or something. And I just feel like what we talked about, like he was likely told it was happened, but to experience in person, especially in front of peers, is cruel. Like not only to see this and have this reaction, but to have like all your peers around you. I feel like going through something really personal like that, it's just made worse when you have other people around.
You're realizing something about your own life, and it should be like an intimate, quiet moment and not like a public thing where like your reaction is on display.
Yeah, and also they do end up revealing Avada Kedavra as the last curse, which is the killing curse. So Harry also has to see firsthand the spell that killed his parents. And he also gets a spotlight thrown on him because Moody does say that the only person to have survived this curse is Harry, and he kind of points him out. And Harry's just kind of having this like forced on him because Harry never really knew the spell that killed his parents. In his dreams, he just remembers the white, green, like the green light. And he's kind of going through it being like imagining, because he's kind of imagined how his parents would die all this time, especially from the last book where he could hear like their last moments. So he's kind of being able to like put like a spotlight on like how they died and what was used on them and like their last moments. And it's just really like he's just going through his trauma. Like he's basically like dissociated before the class.
Yeah,
Basically, my note here is Dumbledore, you have a lot to answer for.
seriously. Anyhow, after his demonstration, Moody has the class take out paper and take notes, and he teaches them more about these spells. And I'm so curious to know more about these spells. Like, I want to know, like, they've seen how it's done and that it's bad, but, like, is he going to teach the history of how the spell was created, who invented it, where it was first used, how it, like, evolved from being a new spell to being something that was illegal, like, the history of, like, it being used in certain historic crimes or whatever, and, like, what the prison sentence is for using it, and also recommending what counter spells can be used for like Crucio and Imperio. Like, I want to hear these lectures. I know it's not part of the story, so we're not getting it, but like it would be so interesting to get all that information.
Yeah, we do learn a little bit throughout the series, and we learn a little bit. We know that the Imperious Curse, it's definitely used within the series, and we do know that Moody does say that it can be fought off, but you have to have like a lot of like a strong character to be able to do it. And we know that it was used during Voldemort's time, where the Death Eaters kind of used it as an excuse when he was overthrown, being like, "I was under the Imperious Curse. It wasn't my true self."
Yeah. It's specifically funny to imagine someone talking about like the prison sentences that are related to committing crimes with these spells from someone who should still be in prison for doing crimes using these spells. Like it's like back when I was in prison for torturing people with this spell, like the bread was stale, the butter was old.
I mean, I gotta say that Barty Crouch Jr. is a really good actor because
Yeah.
it's hard reading this again, being like, I know he's not Moody, but like, then I'm like, but he is Moody, and it's just like,
But he's like, it's a bit morbid to show the kids like Harry and Neville those spells, but he's actually teaching quite well. Like and you know what I mean? Like I'm not like he's not a bad teacher.
could have been a teacher in another life.
It's a shame he went into crime. He would have been an excellent teacher.
Well, maybe his dad thought that teaching was beneath him, and then he's like, now I'm gonna be a criminal.
That'll show you, Dad.
So after this harrowing lesson, Hermione is like speeding Harry and Ron out, and she wants to go find Neville. And I feel like it's just so sweet that Hermione's like the only one looking out for him. We know that Neville is kind of like that awkward guy in the Gryffindor like group because he doesn't really have a best friend.
Yeah, he's that left out fourth.
Yeah, like we have Lavender and Parvati, we have like the trio of Harry, Ron, Hermione, and we have Dean and Seamus. But Neville's just like he's friends with all of them, but he doesn't have like a best friend. And Hermione's always looking out for him. And now I remember that he does ask her to the Yule Ball. And I feel like it's because of this, because she's always just like there for him and always nice to him.
Yeah.
Harry and Ron aren't even really think. Well, I mean, Harry's dissociating right now, but Ron's not even thinking about anything. He's just like, wow, what a cool lesson.
Yeah. Harry's like trauma, trauma, trauma. And Hermione's like empathy, empathy, empathy.
Sorry, I just want to say, reading this before knowing the truth about Moody, Moody does seem really sweet when he comes out to talk to Neville and kind of like be like, it's okay, Sonny, come have a cup of tea with me. But it's so sinister knowing like this is the guy that caused this trauma to this kid, and now he's like going to go comfort him.
Yeah. And I mean, he seems so empathetic in that moment. You know what I mean? Like most teachers wouldn't. I taught you the thing, get out of my classroom. The fact that he sees how Neville was impacted, reaches out to him. And like when he spends that time with Neville, he gives him a book and he tells him that, you know, Professor Sprout says he's really good at herbology, and like Neville never gets complimented. And like the same way he sort of made Ron feel validated and also mentioned how great a person his dad is, he sort of does the same thing for Neville. And like that's exactly what you'd want in that moment after having gone through sort of that. Like he's really helping Neville emotionally. And like even if he ends up being the terrible person that we know he is, he's this moment of helping him still helped Neville. You know what I mean? In that moment.
I mean, we know that the moment him helping Neville at this point was to give him the book that Harry will need down the line. So it was,
Yeah, it was part of a manipulation, but it's just it's really interesting how like the really evil people can also be really excellent manipulators. But in this particular case, his manipulations have a positive side effect, which is that they help Neville and they help Ron.
I do think it's interesting also that he does ask Harry if he's okay, and Harry says that he's fine, like defiantly. And I think Harry's just so used to all these traumatic things happening that he's just like, well, another, Thursday, which is what Dumbledore wants.
Yeah, it's just like that's my life. It's fine. Whatever. Day in the life.
So this is the moment where Harry and Ron are kind of, talking about the curses and the class and everything. And Harry brings up that, like, oh, maybe Dumbledore would get in trouble with the Ministry for them learning this early. And then Ron does say that Dumbledore does his own thing at Hogwarts. And it's interesting that that's brought up now because in the next book, we do see that the Ministry does interfere with how Dumbledore runs things. And I mean, I know that Umbridge and Fudge are kind of terrible, or the Phoenix, but I do think that something should be done with how Dumbledore does things because
He is very unrestrained, and I think he should probably have some supervisors, someone who has empathy and cares about the well-being of the majority of the students.
McGonagall should have more input.
Yeah, McGonagall would do a good job of it, I think. She's quite fair. Stern and fair, and could kick Dumbledore's ass. I don't care if you think that's not canon. I believe it.
Yeah, but Neville's reading his new herbology book and seems in higher spirits. But Harry and Ron get to working on their predictions for Trelawney's class.
I just really, really enjoy the way they do divination homework. I feel like it's astrology. It's kind of astronomy plus creativity, and I really quite enjoy that as a combination. And I wrote down what the made up predictions they are because I think it's funny that like we often follow through to see if Trelawney ended up accidentally being correct. And I think it's interesting how many of their completely made up, not even actually doing the work, things end up being correct. Like Harry predicts he'll get burned and he fights a dragon, so inevitably he gets a bit burned. Ron predicts he'll lose a treasured possession and he loses his best friend for a bit. That's pretty treasured. Harry predicts he'll be stabbed in the back by someone he thought was a friend, which works well with Moody, who's not Moody.
And also, too, it could be Ron, too, because he always assumes that Ron would always be on his side. And so when they have the falling out, I think he's just more, like, he's really hurt by the fact that Ron, out of everyone, won't believe him.
And then Harry also predicts that he'll come off worse in a fight. And there's a lot of different fights he has, but, like, he fights with Ron, kind of, and Hermione sides with Ron, and he comes off worse than Voldemort in the graveyard scene. Ron predicts he'll lose a bet. I'm like, I don't know of a specific bet, but like maybe he bets on Crumb because Crumb, and maybe he bets that Hermione won't actually have a date to the dance. Like it's not a formal bet.
It's more of how he sees Hermione, where he always assumes Hermione will be there. And so I think when Hermione does go to the dance with Crumb, he's kind of thrown off because I think he just always assumes that she's around.
And he assumed that she'd be available to go with him. So it's kind of a game of chance, which is like taking a bet. Another interesting one is Ron predicts he'll drown twice. And I can think one, he gets put in the Black Lake, which is not breathing basically under there. So that's drowning. And also maybe he drowns in homework. Like there's different ways to view it. And I feel like that's the fun thing about divination is you can sort of interpret anything in a way such that your prediction is correct. So drowning in homework is valid. I can't think of how he got trampled by a hippogriff though, because he does predict he'll get trampled by a hippogriff. And I don't know how to bend that one. I think he went too specific.
I do like that they said that they're just going to put a lot of misery into their month and then Trelawney will be happy. And it turns out that she is happy with her homework. She's like, yes, the angst. I live for it.
Yeah. Honestly, that'd be such fun homework to mark, especially for the ones where you know they didn't do the actual homework. You're like, they're just comfortable telling me they're going to have a terrible life and this is hilarious. Or like reading the gossip basically through like their subconscious.
Yeah, so I saw that while they're doing their homework, Fred and George are in the corner plotting, as Harry assumes, and this is kind of like where they're definitely writing like their letter to Ludo, as I think George or Fred was like, oh, you can't put that, it'll sound like we're accusing him. And Harry's wondering if they're doing stuff for either their joke shop or trying to figure out how to do the Triwizard Tournament. But it's nice that like the blackmail plot's like just they're in there really early, kind of setting the scene.
Yeah.
The end of the chapter ends with Hermione finally revealing her big secret project she's been working on all week, which is Spew, or SPEW, as she says. And I actually didn't realize like how quickly she did this because this is like the Thursday, I think, of like their first week of school. And she found out like the first day, like whatever day it was, like Monday or whatever, that there was house elves at Hogwarts. And basically she spent 3 days researching. And then on like the fourth day of like her first week of school, she's like, okay, I've made a new society.
I've got badges and like, and you know, she did the reading. Like, you don't hear about what she actually learned or what she's fighting for fully here, but you know, she can tell you which court case and when the original rules about wands and all that were put in place. Like, she did her homework. I mean, she always does, but
She did the research and she made her own society. And she was just like girl boss to the sun, basically.
girl boss beyond the sun.
When she reveals the society, Ron's kind of, like being like, Hermione, like, be serious, like house elves are just, that's just the way things are. He says they like being enslaved, and that's such like a fucked up thing to read.
That is such a fucked up thing to read.
Like, I know Ron's supposed to present like, because he's grown up with this, and it's like there are people that like are like, oh, they like it, they like doing this, like, but like that's the way they've been conditioned to be. But it's such like a weird thing hearing it from like Ron, who is generally like, a Weasley, a good guy, like good morals.
This is one of the moments where like I love knowing how Ron and Hermione end up, because like he really needs her because he doesn't overthink things. And when someone says, "Oh, this is the norm, it's how it is," if he doesn't outwardly think it's bad from the first introduction, he doesn't like overthink it. And Hermione, like, she thinks things through all the way, and she does all the like mental labor of going through and deciding it's actually quite wrong, and then she like brings it to Ron and presents it to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is why I love Ron and Hermione. Yeah, I feel like they both challenge each other in the best ways, and they both bring out the best in each other. And I get there's always like people don't like Ron and Hermione as a couple, but I'm like, this is like what I love about them. And like they're better people when they're together because they both have these characteristics that like are sometimes not great, but they force each other to like change and like challenge each other. And it's just like this is the ship, okay?
And if everything Hermione said Ron was fully on board with all the time, it wouldn't be like an equal balanced relationship. And not being fully on board makes Hermione work harder at it. She learns more about it. She learns how to be more convincing about it.
Because the spew thing is kind of the camel that breaks like it breaks the camel's back at the end of Deathly Hollows, where like all throughout the series, Ron kind of snarks at her for spew and all the stuff she does, but at the end he's just like, but what about the house elves? And she's like, this is the man.
It took me 7 years, but he's finally come around.
Like, my man. Yeah, but I like that Hermione like kind of just ignores Harry and Ron. They're interjecting, being like, what's going on here? And she's like, okay, here's your rules. Harry, you should be taking notes. Ron, your treasurer, so I'll get you a change tin. And she's just like, these are my friends. They're obviously going to be involved. And it's just like classic girl boss Hermione attitude.
But also, like, even if they don't want to, she's like, okay, then I won't help you with your homework next time you ask. Like, she's got the upper hand. They can join or they can suffer.
Yeah, so Harry and Ron are just kind of like in half amazement, half like more mortitude, because they're just like, Hermione, this is like pretty amazing. You did all this. This is kind of crazy, but also like you didn't ask us if you wanted to do this. But they're interrupted because Hedwig has finally come back with Sirius's letter. And yeah, so Sirius basically says he's coming back to where Harry is because dark things are happening and he knows that there's signs and he wants to be around if things go bad. And so it's our first like kind of big hint from Sirius. Like we've had hints throughout the first like half of this quarter of this book being like something dark's happening, like things are starting to get crazy, and Sirius knows. Even Ron points out like, what big signs, what's happening? But like we as the audience know that Voldemort's planning something, and then there's been hints through Harry's perspective of like things happening.
And Harry's worried that Sirius coming back is going to put Sirius in danger. And
yeah, Harry's not impressed. Yeah, because the one thing Harry doesn't want is like he finally has this kind of like father figure in his life, even though he's not like act like personally there in his life. He's like, the idea of Sirius is like great to have someone to like bounce things off, but now he's just like, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, I feel like Sirius probably could have been a bit better with writing his letter a bit more specific. Like, don't worry, I'm going to go somewhere safe, closer, but still hidden. Don't be an idiot, Harry. Because now Harry's like, I can't believe I told him, but it's like very important that he did tell him, and that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, Sirius is still very much like a chaos agent. Like he's not really like he is what Harry's only kind of like close father figure, but he doesn't really act like a father. Like Sirius is like
Right. He's still emotionally and stunted and not quite as mature as his age.
and Sirius is still like on survival mode. Like he got out of prison and he's still on the run and stuff, but his whole life goal is to protect Harry. And so there's an active threat, and so we see kind of like the change when he's actually like, relatively safe in Order of the Phoenix, and that's when he kind of like we really see how like immature he is. But at this point he's just like, in his survival instincts.
Yeah, fight or flight, and he's flighting but towards danger. Gryffindor.
Yeah, but that's kind of the end of the chapter. There was so much stuff going on.
I mean, this chapter, it's so funny because it's about Moody. It's like, hey, this is Moody, just so you know. And like the chapter is basically just Moody doing self-esteem boosting compliments and torture. Like that's it.
Yeah, but do you have any other final remarks before we wrap up?
I agree with you that Crouch must be an excellent actor because he plays this part really, really well. And I love that they presented the Moody character at this point as like he's cool, people like him, he's neat, he's gruff, he's seen it all, and like he's a bit like he seems too comfortable showing the kids these dangerous spells. But at the same time, they show him as empathetic. Like he's written as a very complicated, multifaceted character who like has different sides and opinions on different issues, and being an empathetic person who wants students to feel good about themselves doesn't also have to be separate from being someone who thinks traumatizing them is worth them being prepared for the oncoming dangers. Like it's just different people have different strengths and weaknesses and things they take too far and things they don't take far enough. And I think Moody's a really good example. How Moody is presented at this point is a really good example of that.
Yeah, I definitely like the comparisons we're already kind of drawing between Neville and Harry. They were already kind of like starting, but this is the book where we find out about Neville's past and like how really connected Harry and Neville are, and seeing like the differences and the similarities between them. And Neville just breaks my heart every time I read this. I just feel for that poor guy. I also really am looking forward to getting more spew out of Hermione, as I don't think I really appreciated reading it as a kid because I found it kind of embarrassing. But especially in the climate we are now, it's just like, yeah, we need to be doing better and doing more. And I love that Hermione's just a go-getter, and she doesn't care that Harry and Hermione, or she doesn't care that Harry and Ron think she's cringe or too much. She's just like, this is what I'm passionate about.
She knows what she thinks is right, and she's going to do all the legwork.
And I love to hear Sirius finally back in the picture. And yeah, I feel like I don't remember the book being so slow to start off with, but I feel like we're finally getting more into like meaty chapters and stuff happening finally. I feel like a lot of it was just explaining or setting up, and it just took a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty far into the actual physical book, and we haven't even drawn names out of the Goblet of Fire.
Yeah, because I feel like the other books were smaller, but I feel like things happened a lot quicker. But there was a lot of like us just traveling places in this book, and so it was just trying to set up for a lot of things. Because I do remember hearing that this book was kind of like people thought it was one of the weaker books just because it is the turning point, but there's just a lot going on, and maybe it could have been a bit tighter. But still enjoying it, and very excited for the next chapter. Thank you for listening to this episode of Potter Revisited. We will be back next time to discuss Chapter 15, Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Yeah, if you have any comments on today's episode, you can email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out on social media at Potter Revisited, and we will see you next time. Bye!